Shadow Brexit Secretary Sir Keir Starmer, increasingly putting on pressure, saying that whatever deal the government does must have the exact same benefits. Well, whether that means the exact same disbenefits, I'm not sure. And Emily Thornberry coming out on Friday and basically saying Labour will vote against any deal. So very often we talk about Brexit, we talk about the divisions within the Conservative Party, Boris v Theresa, Rees-Mogg on one side and Philip Hammond on the other, and we keep talking about Brexit as if it's purely a Tory thing. It isn't. The Labour Party's positioning on this and how they ultimately vote in the House of Commons is just as important. So, high time we really did try to examine where Labour are going on this. And to help me through this, I've got Lance Price, former advisor to Tony Blair and author of The Spin Doctor's Diary and Where Power Lies. Lance, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel.
Are you surprised that Sadiq Khan has come out and said this at a week before the Labour Party conference?
I'm not surprised. It's worth noting that in his article in The Observer, he doesn't mention the Labour Party once. I mean, he talks about what's in the best interests of the country and what's in the best interests of London. So he really is putting his day job first, and his day job is to look after the interests of London. He's been elected Mayor of London to represent everybody, however they voted, either politically or in the Brexit referendum. But nor does it surprise me, you introduce it as a discussion about the Labour Party, even though Sadiq didn't talk about the Labour Party.
No, but he is the most senior executive the Labour Party have in this country, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the most senior elected person to an elected position with real power over real people's lives and budgets and so on that we have. Yeah, no, he's a very, very big figure in the Labour Party, and he deserves to be listened to.
Now, I've also noticed, increasingly over the last few weeks from Sir Keir Starmer and others, I mean, there is very, very big pressure now, is there not, on the Labour Party to effectively push for a second referendum?
Yes, it's certainly moving in that direction, and the Labour leadership, including Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, have been careful to keep their options open. They've never completely ruled out a second referendum. They've simply said that they are not at the moment calling for one. And I think there are quite a lot of people in the Labour Party, and I would certainly put myself in that number, who think that Labour's position has been really all about tactics up until now and not about principle. And there's going to come a point pretty soon, because it's all coming to a head. We're about to hit crunch time in the negotiations when a momentously big decision about the future of Britain is going to be taken one way or the other by somebody or another. And I think that if it is patently, as I believe it will be, and I'm sure you disagree, but if it's patently not in the interest of the people of Britain, then the people of Britain have the right to say, whoa, hang on a minute.
Yeah, I mean, the argument, Lance, I would make is we're talking all of this in terms of economics and what our projections are for the future. There are some other arguments here about independence, controlling borders, etc. But at the moment, that is not what's being discussed out there. Now, I can see from Sadiq's point of view that London, quite a strong Remain area, still a strong Remain area. Electorally, I suspect that Sadiq Khan has taken very little risk at all. He has, of course, also had plunging poll ratings just recently after the recent spate of knife crime. But more broadly, around the country, if we look at that 2016 Brexit vote, and we then look at the Labour Party's, to many, surprisingly good performance in the 2017 general election, the estimates that I'm getting are that up to 5 million people who voted Brexit voted for Corbyn in 2017. If the Labour Party comes out of the conference next week effectively advocating a second referendum, or at some point shortly after that, doesn't this also potentially, and I'm thinking about South Wales, I'm thinking about the Midlands, I'm thinking about the north of England, doesn't this at some point, Lance Price, allow Conservatives in marginal seats to say the Labour Party have betrayed your vote?
Well, that's what I mean about the debate being too much about tactics and not about principle. And I think it would be wrong of the Labour Party to make judgments on what's in the interest of the country based on marginal constituencies in any part of the country in a future general election. And, we can trade poll findings until the cows come home. there have been plenty of polls in Leave constituencies suggesting that people have started to change their minds, and that more people have been changing their minds in Labour constituencies than elsewhere. So I'm not sure that your argument, which may have held good in 2016 and 2017, I'm not sure it holds good now. And the thing about democracy is it's a fluid thing. People are allowed to change their minds. Nothing is set in stone. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a democracy if people weren't allowed to change their minds.
But we haven't even but we haven't even had Brexit yet.
Well, the key question is whether or not what we're faced with come March of next year is remotely close to what anybody voted for in 2016, and I don't believe it will be. And I'm absolutely convinced that what we are offered is something that was never even discussed as a possibility during the referendum campaign, when some people elected to Parliament and others who never quite made it to Parliament argued it was going to be such a simple process, and it clearly isn't. We go to
the Labour Party conference. I've made the point that there are millions of people who voted Labour who believe in Brexit, and particularly in those three regions I mentioned. Can the Labour Party discuss this at their conference without the impression of division being created?
I think they have to, whether or not it leads to some people recognising the obvious fact that the Labour Party is also divided on this. I think the electorate of this country are grown-ups. They recognise that Brexit and the whole business of our relationship with the European Union causes deep divisions in all parties. I mean, even the Liberal Democrats have had their Eurosceptics in the past. Yep. So I don't think we need to be afraid of having a healthy debate about this if it gets us to the right position in the end. And I think the public and the electorate are more than happy to see parties debate these things, rather than what appears to be the case with the Labour Party running away from the difficult questions on this. They can't run away from them very much longer.
No, OK, decision time coming soon. Lance Price, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Well, that was Lance Price, former advisor to Tony Blair, saying the Labour Party needs to make its mind up, and he's right, it probably does need to make its mind up. Sadiq Khan, though, has sort of fired the first shot. He says we need a second referendum. Do you think he's right? If you think, yeah, let's ignore the first vote, let's have another go, then call me on 0345 6060 973, or maybe you think actually he's doing it because there's a lot of Remainers in London. It suits him for the upcoming mayoral elections, given the recent plunges in his popularity, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe you feel outraged that he is prepared to discard the vote that people took before Brexit has even been given a chance to work, in which case please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Let's go to Sherborne and speak to Malcolm, a new caller. Malcolm, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I am very well indeed, and I'm not in the least bit surprised by what Sadiq Khan has said, and I think the Labour Party are moving rapidly towards endorsing a second referendum, and my view, Malcolm, is I don't think they understand the damage this is going to do them.
Well, first of all, Nigel, I just want to encourage you, don't fall into the trap of misleading people in the way that Sadiq and the Remainers are by talking about a second referendum. This is a third referendum.
Well, we had the one in 75.
I was old enough in 1976 to vote to go into the EU. Now, after 40 years, I and a majority of other people have decided that it wasn't good and it wasn't in our best interest when we had a second referendum. Now, I'm quite happy to have a third referendum in 10, 20 years' time if we change our mind, but for goodness sake, we've got to get out first, because we've decided in a democratic referendum 2 years ago that that's what we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm, your point about it being a third referendum, you're right, but you have to be, I think, 61 years old to have participated in that 1975, as it was, referendum. Malcolm, I'm with you. This argument that we get, that in a democracy people can change their minds, well, of course they can, but we've voted for something. We have to see how it works for a bit first before there should be even any thought of a second referendum.
But this is why I think we must talk about a third one, because when I and others who were ancient and old enough to vote in the 76 one, we had no idea what the outcome was going to be. People said good things, bad things and so forth, but the reality of the future is always different to those who sort of pretend to have visionary sights. And the same is today. Nobody can tell what the future is. I happen to believe that the future will be very, very more positive in a number of ways as a result of unshackling ourselves from this undemocratic EU. But, only circumstances and the future that will determine whether I'm right or not.
Do you feel that those like Sadiq Khan, Malcolm, who are calling for a second referendum are effectively betraying the Brexit vote?
Oh, of course they are, and they've all got their nose in the trough, haven't they? I mean, let's face it, back in 76 before, the size of the state and the proportion of the population that were dependent on the state, either by being employees or beneficiaries and so forth, was much, much lower. But now, Sadiq Khan, I mean, he gets a nice little earner, doesn't he, from being mayor of London?
Well, he has to work.
And a lot of other people too.
He does have to work hard too. Malcolm, I thank you. And I get on Twitter from Ant, Labour seem to have quickly forgotten that 2/3 of Labour constituencies voted Leave. In England and Wales, that is absolutely true. They have forgotten about it because the Labour Party is now run from North London. They're disconnected from all of this. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it is 10:15. In today's Observer, London Mayor Sadiq Khan calls for a second referendum. But that's not the language they use, folks. No. It's a new referendum. That's the language that he's using. And the Observer editorial say we must be given a fresh vote. As if somehow the referendum that they want us to have is not connected with the one that we had a couple of years ago. Sorry, folks, it doesn't wash. It's a rerun, isn't it? It's a, we don't accept the result. We think you're thick, ignorant and stupid, and we're going to try our very best to make you do it again. Now, Barry asks me, he says by text, I'm puzzled. Remainers went to court to prove that Parliament is sovereign and not a referendum. Why do they now want a referendum, having gone to such lengths to say decisions should be made in Parliament? Am I missing something? Well, Barry, the reason is, if Parliament completely overturned the referendum result, they know that politically that would be suicide. What they've got to do is, and it may come to, actually, they may decide that suspending Article 50 is a more likely method for them. But ultimately, they would have to get this overturned in a second referendum. Any alternative to that is a political impossibility. But look, the whole thing's an outrage. And we've seen it all before. We've seen Denmark be made to vote again. We've seen the Irish twice be made to vote again. This is the same game. The big bullying multinationals and big politics not accepting the will of the people. And it's just not good enough. Now, earlier on this morning, Andrew Castle interviewed Ian Duncan-Smith, former Tory leader. Here's what he had to say on a second referendum.
Well, I don't think there's any desire in any way for having another fractious referendum. The last referendum was experience enough, frankly. I don't think people want to go back through that process. And most of all, I don't see what this is all about. When you ask people a question and they vote in a democracy, you don't keep asking the same question again and again and again as to whether or not there should be a decision until they get what I think those who want to remain the right answer. And the right answer is what they gave, which they want to leave, and they want the government and Parliament to get on with it. The reality for us is we need to get the arrangement that best reflects ultimately what leaving means, which is, as has been said, to take control of our borders, our laws and our money. And I don't think that needs to constantly keep going back to the British people. So I think it would lead to a huge anger amongst many in the public who feel like they've been betrayed, that they were asked a question, and because the answer they gave wasn't satisfactory to what is called, essentially loosely, those of the establishment, who seem, by the way, to be driven mad by this vote because they can't understand what life is like outside the European Union. Well, that is not a reason to hold a referendum. The referendum was, should we leave? The answer is yes. The best deal that we can get is the deal we leave on.
That was Ian Duncan-Smith saying it's absolutely wrong to ask us to vote again. And not just the anger that Ian Duncan-Smith talked about, but my worry is a complete breakdown in our belief in the whole democratic process. Janet on Twitter says to me, I'm 56 years old. I have voted in every election since I was 18. If there is a second Brexit referendum, I will never vote again because I will never trust that my vote won't be overturned. And Janet, you are not alone. The number of people I've met in the last 6 months who said, we voted in that Brexit referendum, and unlike you, Janet, we've never voted in our lives before. If we don't get what we wanted, we'll never participate in politics again. This is about, actually, our entire system of government, the relationship between people. people and Parliament, and there's a lot at risk here. Ian is a new caller from Amsterdam. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, do you think Sadiq Khan is right to say what he said, or is it actually just a huge insult to a country that voted freely and fairly for Brexit?
Well, the country did not vote freely and fairly, because I was one of the probably 3 million Brits who live within the European Union was ineligible to vote in this undemocratic referendum.
Well, lots of it.
It was a 48 to 52% swing.
Ian, lots of Brits living in the European Union, and some living in Australia, were able to vote in the referendum. Why were you?
I wasn't.
Right.
Because I've lived in the European Union for 28 years. 7 years was the cut-off date.
Well, 15, I think it can be up to, can't
15,
it?
sorry.
Yeah, right, okay. So, yes, well, Ian, they're the rules. If you emigrate after 15 years...
I've not emigrated. I'm living within Europe, which is, to me, one country.
Oh,
and
one flag, one president, one anthem. We should all stand to attention and be proud Europeans. Ian, that's fine if that's your view, but it's a very much minority view.
Yeah, but it's not our minority. If there's pushing 2 to 3 million of us who live within the European community who didn't get a vote, that vote, your referendum would have completely gone the opposite way. So my question still to David Cameron is, because nobody will listen to us, nobody. Yeah, there was even the State of Union speech in Strasbourg, Brussels during the week.
Yeah.
Not one single word. You sit there a few times a week. I would love you to ask the question, us Brits living here, may the Brits who live in Europe have a voice? Because we don't get anything.
Ian,
we can't go to general elections.
Ian, you've made your choice. You've gone to live in a different country. You know, you had the vote for 15 years, you've been there 28, you don't get the vote anymore, and I think there's just about zero prospect of that law changing. I mean, no party in any manifesto since I've been involved in politics has even considered it to be an option.
No, completely the wrong option. I left Britain because it was a third world country 30 years ago. It's going to become a fifth world country.
Is it? Right, okay, well, if that's how you feel, Ian, you're living in the right place, thank you, but that law, folks, is not going to change. In fact, many would argue that actually it's quite generous of our electoral system to allow people to have a vote up to 15 years after they've left. Mike is a new caller from Colville in Leicestershire. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning there.
So, I mean, when we think about Sadiq Khan, he's had a rotten time, hasn't he?
Yes,
you know, 100 homicide, knife crime homicides in London.
Yeah. Listen,
I mean, is he doing this purely for electoral benefit, do you think?
No, that's a red herring. Sadiq Khan is the mayor of London. London is the centre of financial services. He's got a very, very difficult thing to take into account because New York, Paris, Frankfurt, Singapore are all looking to get into that pie. Now, it's quite understandable that he wants to see his dominion in London well established to take on the future. And I think he's doing the right thing. But let me just say something else to you about UKIP.
About UKIP?
Yeah, UKIP. Now,
well, I tell you what, Mike. I tell you what, Mike. We will talk about UKIP because they've got a conference coming up too at the end of this week, and we will talk about UKIP and their role and where things are going. But you can give me a quick 20 seconds on UKIP, Mike.
Okay. UKIP need a new leader. Boris Johnson is not a one-nation Tory. He would be ideal to lead UKIP. That is the person that you should discuss at your next party.
All right, well, Mike, I'm not sure UKIP is a vote for him because amongst other things, Liberal Boris has advocated in the past, giving amnesties to illegal immigrants. But Mike, thank you for your suggestion. And Mike talked there a little bit about the City of London financial services. And my argument's always been, financial services, it's a global market, not a European market, it's a global market. And I strongly believe that EU regulation has led to much business leaving London. Reinsurance business heading off to Bermuda and elsewhere. Hedge fund business as a direct result of an EU directive heading off to Switzerland, Singapore and elsewhere. And I think actually for financial services, Brexit is a phenomenal opportunity for the City of London to be even bigger than it is today. That is my view. Please, come on, tell me I'm wrong. 03456060973. Lawrence is calling from Colchester. Good morning, Lawrence.
Good morning, Sir Nigel.
Good to hear from you again, Lawrence. We've had you on before. So, Sadiq Khan, I mean, I'm pretty angry that he's done this, but I'm not surprised.
Well, a UKIP supporter myself and have been for 10 years. I think the guy's a joke, to be honest with you. I don't think he'll become mayor in the next election. I mean,
I tell you what, Lawrence, who's going to beat him? Have you even ever heard of any of the Tory candidates?
No, but they've got bigger problems than the mayor of London.
Right, fair enough. Yeah. Well, that may well be true. That may well be true. So, what's your message to Sadiq Khan, Lawrence?
He, as a man, is a decent man, but I don't think he understands the democratic vote. Now, both my grandparents fought in the war, and I was proud of what they'd done. One got the George Medal.
Wow.
He was an RAP warden, and he saved a woman's life and her baby in Tilbury. Now, my other granddad was a prisoner of war. He was in the 51st Scottish Regiment.
Highland Division,
yeah. Now, I'm so proud of them. I've got the medals and everything. Now, no one would ever have the chance for freedom of speech if the Nazis had won. That's common sense. Everybody knows.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Lawrence. But so is somehow what Sadiq Khan is doing, in your view, against what people fought for?
Absolutely, 100%. And Nigel, I'm a peaceful guy, and all my friends and family are peaceful. But if this referendum gets turned over, which it won't, surely our system would come back and say something about it. I mean, the Queen would have to say something.
Well, Lawrence, we're not there yet. Thank you for your passion. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 10:30, and Sadiq Khan calls for a second referendum, and I'm not happy, but I'm not surprised. Before we go back to that, Theresa May, and this is a big interview she's done with Panorama for the BBC, and she said she gets irritated by the ongoing speculation over her position as Prime Minister. The interview is going to mark the 6th-month countdown to Brexit, and she said the debate should be about the country's future rather than her own.
Look, I said what I said to my party. Throughout my time in public service, it has been about service. As a councillor, as an MP, as a Home Secretary, and now as Prime Minister. But actually, this is where I get a little bit irritated. This debate is not about my future. This debate is about the future of the people of the UK and the future of the United Kingdom. That's what I'm focused on, and that's what I think we should all be focused on. It's ensuring that we get that good deal from the European Union, which is good for people in the UK, wherever they live in the UK. That's what's important for us, and that's what I'm focusing on. It's the future of people in the UK that matters.
Well, it is, but it's also about getting the Brexit they voted for, I would have thought. Now, she was also quizzed about Boris Johnson's comments about the Chequers deal being like strapping a suicide vest around the UK.
Well, first of all, I have to say I think that choice of language was completely inappropriate. I've been Home Secretary, was Home Secretary for 6 years and was Prime Minister for 2 years now. I think using language like that was not right, and it's not language I would have used. But let's look at the argument about the issue in relation to Northern Ireland. The people of Northern Ireland deserve to be listened to in these negotiations by the UK government as people elsewhere in this country. I want to ensure that as we go forward, we have that strong union, that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and it's important that we deliver for the people of Northern Ireland. They don't want a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. The only proposal that's been put forward that delivers on them not having that hard border and ensures that we don't carve up the United Kingdom is the Chequers plan.
And there's the clue to it all. The hard border, the Barnier line about the hard border, which she has bought into, and in her attempt to pacify Monsieur Barnier, she's prepared to keep us in full regulatory alignment with all European rules, old ones and new ones, and to keep us under the European Court of Justice. And this has been Barnier's great win in these negotiations, is that he's forced the Prime Minister into that position. At the top of the hour, we'll talk about a new, positive way forward on this. Now, Sadiq Khan. Yes. Craig very helpfully sends me by text. During the referendum, Sadiq Khan said, if we as a country decide to quit, then we're out for good. There's no going back. That's right, Sadiq Khan. And this morning, Sadiq Khan has been on with Andrew Marr, and he's been rather caught out by an LBC interview he did after the referendum.
The British public should have a say on the outcome of the negotiations, including what the Prime Minister negotiates with the EU, plus the option of staying in the EU.
Let's just remind ourselves what you said after the first referendum on LBC.
I think the problem for those of us who are saying to the British public there should be a second referendum, it will lead to even more cynicism. It will lead to the British public saying, hold on a sec, these were the rules of the game, we voted in record numbers, and now you're ignoring us. And I've got grievances about the way the campaign was conducted, but the reality is, Julian, the British public had a say. They voted, and they voted to leave, and my job as the Mayor of London is to heal some of the rifts that were created during the campaign and make sure our city carries on being the greatest city in the world. And I've done that. So one of the things I could have done over the last 2 years and 3 months is cross my arms and watch it all fail and say, I told you so. I've met David Davis 8 times. Met the Prime Minister, the Chancellor.
But you said then, no going back. It would create cynicism and create rifts. What's changed?
And it's really important that this is not a rerun of the referendum, but the British public having a say for the first time on the outcome.
But it is a second referendum.
Well,
that's what it is.
Yeah, but when the campaign was taking place, Boris Johnson said we could leave the EU and have access to the single market. Untrue. Liam Fox said this would be the easiest trade deal to be done in history. Untrue. Nobody said there'd be jobs being lost.
Oh, yes, they did. Oh, yes, they did. Actually, Sadiq, all your mates on the Remain side told us 500,000 jobs lost quickly. That was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Britain going down the tubes. The car makers leaving. Foreign investment stopping. Plagues of black locusts descending. Everyone told us if we vote to leave, it'll be an economic disaster. So please don't pull that one. I just think, how on earth can you expect people to have trust in our political class when they behave as Sadiq Khan is behaving? I think the whole thing is appalling, and once again, they use economics. They always use economics. Do you remember, if we don't join the euro, it'll be a disaster for Britain? Well, thank God we didn't listen to them then. Let's go to Roger, who's calling from Barmouth. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Mr. Raj. Just a quick one. Like a lot of people, I voted for out.
Yep.
Right? Now, all I saw when the campaign was being run was a big red bus with 390 million a week for the National Health.
Yeah.
And 40 billion a year we're not going to pay them.
Yep.
Now, that was a lie. It was a plain lie, wasn't it? Because next March, we're still going to go on paying them, and the National Health isn't going to get
well,
the
actually,
money.
the National Health, I mean, in fact, if you listen to what Mrs. May's been saying...
That was what it was all about.
Yeah.
And also...
Well, actually, no, Roger, that was a tiddly part of what it was about.
It's not. That was what was
how
on
do you
that
put...
bus. Have you sold the bus?
If they put 220 million a week on, no one would have known the difference, and it would have been a very... But the idea of not giving away lots of money, Roger, was an important part of the referendum.
But it was that 40 billion a year.
It was 10 billion a year. 10 billion a year.
And also...
No, Roger, stop. 10 billion a year.
It was 40. It was on 300.
Well, I'm afraid your mind is playing tricks with you this Sunday morning.
Have you still? I mean, I'm not being funny. And also, I mean, a lot of this wasn't told us back. Passports, borders.
Yes, Roger, how many times? Every single TV interview I did in the 18-month run-up to that referendum, I paraded my passport on television and said, I want to get rid of this, and the words European Union, we want to get back proper border controls. Roger, I find it difficult to believe that you were a Leave voter. I really do.
I was a Leave voter, and now I don't know. You know, after all, there's a lot of people like me think, oh my God. I mean, at the time, It was all the people coming in, the people coming in the country, and that would stop. That's it. That was what we were told. We're going to have our own border at Dover, and that's it. It stops. Well, it won't, will it? I mean, it's not. That was another thing.
I don't remember a single... Roger, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. But,
well, I'm sorry.
I'm really sorry, Roger, but every single one... every single fact you've given me this morning, Roger, is wrong. Plain wrong. And even on the immigration issue, on which I would have been seen to be tougher than some of the people involved with the Leave campaign, I never argued for putting barbed wire on the beaches at Dover and pulling up the drawbridge. All I argued was we should control who's coming over the drawbridge.
Yeah, that's what everybody wanted, but will we be able to do that?
Of course. As a sovereign country, we can do it. One of the frustrations... How many
years does it take for this to take place?
It should be done by now. And if we had a proper Prime Minister...
it's not, is it?
No, we got an absolutely...
And next March is the cut-off line, so...
We've got a dreadful Prime Minister.
That next March, everything stops. We don't pay them no more into the euro.
I wouldn't pay them a single penny piece after
we've
next
still
March.
got to pay it, haven't we?
No, we haven't got to pay anything.
But
our Prime Minister has agreed to, and that's a very different thing. Roger, I thank you. You're having a little bit of trouble remembering some of the things that were said in that campaign. On Facebook, David says, they said it was one vote, never to be done again. The vote of a lifetime. Why don't these non-democratic Remainers understand about that? Kev says, if we have another vote, democracy is dead in this country. I'm not sure I would ever vote again just to be ignored. Kev, that I picked up, certainly when I was in the West Country, over the summer period, meeting some of those communities in North Cornwall. People say, look, we haven't voted for 30 years, Nigel, but we went out and voted in this because it really, we felt, mattered to our community, and if we get ignored, we'll never, ever vote again. So it's not just about anger, it's about breakdown in trust in our entire system. And what Sadiq Khan is doing, he said in that earlier interview on LBC, it would lead to increased cynicism if people wanted a second referendum. Well, you bet your life this morning, Sadiq Khan, there is a lot of increased cynicism. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's 10:45. In the aftermath of the referendum vote to leave, Sadiq Khan said this on LBC.
I think the problem for those of us who are saying to the British public there should be a second referendum, it will lead to even more cynicism. It will lead to the British public saying, hold on a sec, these were the rules of the game, we voted in record numbers, and now you're ignoring us.
And today, front page of The Observer, Sadiq Khan, give Britain a new referendum on Brexit. And people wonder why increasingly politicians are distrusted, disliked, or even hated in some quarters. And somebody else that I can't stand is the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, who, of course, this week, and if you listen to my midweek show, you'll know I've been talking about this week, his term has been extended by our Chancellor Philip Hammond, despite the fact he's an out-and-out Remainer without an ounce of neutrality about him, telling us this week, advising the Cabinet that a no-deal Brexit could see a 35% drop in house prices. I'm surprised he put the figure as low as that. And just to really cheer me up this morning, news reports that Mark Carney is set to gain British citizenship in the coming months, potentially opening the way for him to be given a peerage and enter the House of Lords, who will rid us of this turbulent Canadian. Looks like he's here forever and here to stay. Now, Linda is a new caller to this show, and she lives in one of the great tourist attractions, tourist sites in the whole world. In fact, people fly, Linda, thousands of miles from Russia just to see your 132-metre spa in Salisbury, don't they? Hello?
No, they do, yes, they do.
Good morning, Linda.
But I wanted to cover, it's very nice to talk to you, Nigel.
Good, well, thank you.
I have emailed you, but I never knew whether you got them or not. I just wanted to say that if we go back in history, and I'm talking not World War I or II, we go right back to kings and queens, when all they fought for was independence and sovereignty.
Yep.
We come forward and we changed our kings and queens to Parliament, who were supposed to be acting for the people.
Yes.
And we now come forward and we have 2 wars, and people voted for the common market, but we eventually somehow ended up in the EU. And I just feel that is it possible, Nigel, that if we did actually come out, it's not just the big businesses that were going to lose money at the top end of the markets, but also some of the MPs that were lining their pockets for gaining and staying into this country and not even considering. It's got nothing to do with this country. It's all to do with money.
Well,
and who's going to benefit from it?
Yeah, I mean,
I will say is
all through history, Linda,
to this country is small businesses.
All through history, Linda, you know, many of these great political debates are about money, and sort of power is almost a subset of that. Whether it's, you know, the Corn Laws or whatever we discuss, slavery even, very often, you know, it's big money that wants to keep the status quo exactly as it is. Your point about going back to the fact that we had kings and queens and then we went for a parliamentary system. Tony Benn used to argue that as an MP, the people trusted you for a period of time to look after not just their interests in a representative democracy, but the country's interests. And Ben's argument was that for Parliament to have given away this amount of sovereignty, actually, it wasn't ever within their right to do so, and something really very bad happened when we were falsely sold the common market back in
well, the other thing I wanted to say was that since we've joined the EU, we have actually had to sell everything we have as a rich country, like our water, our electric, etc., etc. And we were a very rich country before we went into the common market.
Yeah.
And I do feel that things go round in circles, and as I said, the small businesses and the middle class of this country are small businesses, and they're the backbone to this country. Things go round in circles.
Okay.
And if we do come out, you can be assured that places like Birmingham will actually start their small businesses again.
Linda, we are going to come out.
Will work.
We are going to come out, because whatever your Sadiq Khans or others try to do, even if they force us into a second referendum, the Leavers will win by a bigger majority. I'm certain of that. The bloody-minded decentness of the British people will come out. Thank you, Linda, for that. Philip in Whiteleaf says, if the Remainers don't implement the result of the referendum, why should we recognise the legitimacy of any vote? Also, we never had a vote to join the EU. Philip, you're right. People forget that point. We were taken in to the European Union by the Heath government, and we were given a referendum subsequently on whether we should leave. George is another new caller to this show, and he lives in Stoke-on-Trent. Good morning, George.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well. So how do you feel about Sadiq Khan telling us that there can't be a second referendum? It would lead to massively increased cynicism, and then today saying we should have one.
My only reaction to it is a lack of surprise, Nigel.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
You know, he's never wanted. One of the things I was going to comment was the one thing the establishment fear most of than anything else is democracy.
Do you mean the great? Do you mean the great unwashed, George?
Exactly. Yes, they are absolutely terrified of it. They've got their little places, and the other thing I've come to realise over the years, and I'm 76 now, is the fact that governments don't govern.
Right.
Certainly not for the benefit of the people of the country, anyway. You know, but the thing about it is this: that you can go on having referendums as long as you want to get the answer you want. As you commented earlier, that happened in Ireland, for example.
Oh yeah, twice.
The Labour Party, the Conservative Party, at the last general election said, whatever happens, we are going to back the decision of the people.
You see, George,
and suddenly,
George,
both
that point,
parties are backtracking.
That point, George, is very powerful. Yeah. And it's this: we didn't just vote to leave in a referendum. We voted in a subsequent general election on manifestos where both Labour and Tory said, vote for us. And this is a complete betrayal of the democratic process. It's a betrayal of two votes, George, actually.
Yeah. Well, when the people who are against it start talking about percentages, I just checked before I just spoke to you, the percentage of people who voted for the two parties was 90-odd%.
Certainly,
so 90-odd% were saying yes.
It was certainly over 85%, George. It was. Yeah. George, I thank you for your call and thank you for listening. Got time for one more quick call on this subject. Adam is a new caller from Edgware. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew. How are you?
I am well. So Sadiq has done this. He is trying, whatever Lance Price said earlier, to pressure the Labour Party's formal position to be for a second referendum. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I feel that it's going to be a very strange situation where you've got a leadership, basically Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, who have always been Benites and have always been anti-Europe, who suddenly accept this, knowing full well that they don't really believe in it at all. I'd be very surprised if this actually goes through, if they actually support a second vote.
But the thing is, Adam, and you're quite right, you know, McDonnell and Corbyn, very much Benites, very much opposed to the European project, particularly on the grounds of democracy and a lack of democracy within it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But on this subject, Adam, they are hostages to their parliamentary party, most of whom are Blairite and are completely in love with the European project, and oddly, Momentum, those on the sort of Trotskyite left, they too seem to see the European Union as being this wonderful prototype for a new form of global government. So Corbyn and McDonnell are massively outnumbered on this. Now, you know, Kate Hoey, in an interview in the Telegraph yesterday, said, well, actually, she thinks they'll hold the line, but can they?
Well, the thing is, the way I see it is that there will be probably, the Parliamentary Labour Party will probably force them. And obviously, there are large sections of momentum. It's actually very confusing, actually, because if large sections of momentum, let's be honest, momentum are really there to support Corbyn and McDonnell. That's how they got him into power.
Yes.
But for them to take the view that basically we need to be pro-European, I'm just thinking, you know, what would Tony Benn say? He'll probably say something Adam, it should be absolutely honest.
Good try. No, it's absolutely bizarre, but you've got this on the hard left. Some of the hard left are Stalinists and believe in the nation, and the Trotskyites believe in global revolution. Adam, I thank you. Tony says the Labour Party are about to commit political suicide. Tony, I agree. I don't think they realise what damage a second referendum, if they go for it, will do them in South Wales, the Midlands and the North. So you've got Sadiq writing this article this morning, but also Ian Duncan Smith wrote something too in the Sunday Express. The former Tory leader has said that the Prime Minister needs to ditch checkers and we need to reunite, a positive word, reunite the country. How would you bring Remainers and Brexiteers together? Would a global free trade deal unite us all? Call 0345 6060 973. Maybe think it's impossible because the whole thing's too divisive, in which case text to 84850. Can you think of another way of bringing the country together? If you can, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Actually, I think a free trade deal with the European Union would unite the country, and it's possible. It can be done. But all this negativity, all this increased cynicism that Sadiq Khan was talking about, if people called for a second referendum, which he himself has now done, all this anger, people saying they'll never ever vote again, increasingly we're told that we are a divided country. Well, quite how a second referendum would help that process, I simply and utterly don't know.